Tom Sykes from the Royalist. Welcome to Lauren the Insider.
Thanks very much for having me, Lauren.
Let's get straight to it. Prince Harry coming back to the UK. Home Office are reviewing the application he's put in. What do you make of this?
Yeah, so it's absolutely astonishing development, really. Anyone who's been following the story of Harry and his security will be well aware that in May, Harry suffered an absolutely thumping defeat, having spent millions of pounds, taken the Home Office to court, seriously jeopardized his relationship with his father to try and get this thing called a risk management analysis reinstated, which is the key to unlocking security protection. And he was told, no, you're not eligible for an RMB, a risk management board analysis, and you're not going to get protection. The Home Office said it was pleased with the result. The Palace said, that all these things have been through many times, and this confirms everything that's happened. Well, suddenly on Sunday, it was announced not announced, but the Sun revealed completely out of the blue that the Home Office has agreed to give Harry the RMB analysis, the very thing that they have been denying him for the past 5 years. So
do you not think, though, Tom, this is part of a bigger plot? Because obviously Shabana Mahmood came into power in September and Harry put the request in October. To me, as a former PR, it looks like he is being advised to go through all of the official routes and that King Charles is absolutely aware of everything that's going on. I think he's behind a lot of this as well, I'm sorry to say.
So I actually think that it's actually the opposite. I think that Harry has always mistaken this whole RMB thing as being personality driven. He's always said that it's the king who has blocked him having the RMB. He said explicitly in a BBC interview after the whole thing collapsed and he was humiliated in court. He said specifically, he was asked specifically, what role do you think your father has to play in this? And he said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, I've never asked my father to pull strings for me. I've asked my father to get out of the way. So the RMB and RAVEC, which is the other, and it's a sort of whole hydra of acronyms involved, can do its job. So I think that in a way, Harry's mistake throughout this whole thing has been to characterize it as a personal crusade against him by Clive Alderton or the king or whatever. And I equally think that the other way, to say that the king is sort of intimately involved in manipulating the levers of power for this to happen, I think there's actually a much simpler reason why this RMB is happening. And to understand that, you have to look at the court documents that were issued when he was denied the RMB back in May. So when he was denied that RMB, what the Court of Appeals judgment says over and over again, and these documents are openly available, the judgment is openly available and you can read it. It repeatedly says that Harry was not eligible for this risk management procedure because he no longer lives in the United Kingdom, right? That's what they say over and over again. And the RMB as conceived by RAVEC is like, okay, well, you live in, Orpington, and therefore who in Orpington is going to be of a risk to you? Which are the dangerous areas in that area? Who are the known people in that area? It doesn't apply if you live abroad. And it says this point over and over again. And that is why the fact that he is now suddenly out of the blue being given an RMB, I think is perhaps because he has indicated that he wishes to move back to the United Kingdom.
Do you not think it's strange, though, that then in July we saw the pictures of the aides meeting, Harry's aides and King Charles's aides meeting at the ROSL Club, which was absolutely set up? I've been very vocal about that. That was 100% set up. And so if they were willing at that point to put those images and that start of the reconciliation into the public domain. To me, they were a lot further down the road in terms of communicating and everything. I see it from a point where there's been a lot going on behind the scenes, because when then Harry came in September, the mainstream media, who he's either sued or is suing different outlets, were sycophantic over him. It was a fake royal tour. And that can only come from the very top, which is Charles.
Yeah, sure. And I would agree with you that that meeting was set up, and the images, the meeting was clearly leaked, and the photographs were taken on the deck of the private members club, the ROSL. Now, interestingly, because that deck is visible from a public park, you therefore do not have, under the Leveson rules and the press code, you do not have a reasonable expectation of privacy if you can be seen from a public place. But don't forget that royal parks are very different, and you'll know this as a PR lawyer. It's very hard to film in a royal park, for example. The moment you produce a camera in a royal park, it's different to just being in a normal park. So yeah, A, the fact that the photographers happened to just know what was going on. B, the fact that they sat on the balcony to be photographed
for 10 minutes.
For 10 minutes. And I think there was absolutely, you know, obviously both sides have denied it, but I think there's absolutely no doubt that it suited, because the thing you always have to ask, isn't it, is like, who does it suit to have those pictures in the newspaper? And the answer, frankly, is it suits both sides, right? It suits both sides, because Charles looks like the great convener, which is what he's always wanted to be, the peacemaker. You know, please don't make my last years a misery, who can bring the sons together and solve all the problems, which is how he wants to see himself. And it made Harry look like he's being accepted back into the royal family and getting the glow of royal adjacency again. So Charles and Harry have both made it very clear, look, they met in September. So there's no doubt that both of those two men want to be seen as being close to each other. Right, there's no doubt about it. And certainly the photograph at the ROSL was the first step in that. And it was clearly carefully choreographed and was served up for media consumption. But I don't think that actually that the Home Office, I don't think that this decision from the Home Office is coming from like the king leaning on people or doing stuff. I think it's coming from Harry saying, there's been a change in my circumstances. And what is the change in his circumstances that could trigger a reassessment? Well, you only have to look at what was said in those court documents, where it said over and over again, you're not eligible for an RMB, mate, because you don't live in the UK. Well, if he's now saying that he wants to spend more time in the UK, maybe it's not full time, but even if he's saying that he wants to be back in the UK more, they will then have to give him an RMB. I don't think there's much doubt that that RMB is going to result in the restoration of full protection. You get the restoration of full protection, and Harry's got carte blanche to beef up his operation in the UK, to set up an office in the UK. He's got one person working here at the moment. Maybe that could go up to 2 or 3 people. Maybe there could be much more engagements in the UK. It's a massive headache. It's exactly what Charles wants. It's a massive headache for William.
Could it also just be that it was Shabana Mahmood that came into that position? You know, there was a change within the Home Office. So she came into that position in September. Could it be that? And not that Harry is thinking of coming back or spending more time here?
Well, I think it's both. And I don't think this would have been happening under a Home Secretary who wasn't as well disposed to Harry and Meghan as Shabs, as she's known in Whitehall circles. And Shabs, interestingly, signed the letter that was written by all the MPs a couple of years ago, saying that they deplored the racial overtoned bullying of Meghan. I don't know if you remember that letter. It was a couple of years ago. She was a signatory to that letter, which I think is important. Obviously, she has a significant influence in it. And this, of course, is what Richard Eden has been talking about in the Mail when he's been saying there is an establishment plot to bring Harry back. This is exactly what he I deduce has been talking about, that there are people at a very high level within the Home Office who think that Harry absolutely should have security in the UK and that he should be allowed to come back whenever he wants
There
at
is the
the drop of a
argument,
hat.
you
But
know,
I
there
do
is.
think that ultimately, Lauren, I think that something has to have changed in his circumstances to trigger this. And I think that the only thing really that I can think of that could have realistically changed, especially as the Sun said that his threat level was now lower than it was when he was, which was really weird because his threat level was never disclosed. So, you know, who knows where they got that from. The threat level was highly confidential. So the fact that they're disclosing that his threat level is now lower, well, if you look, what else could the material change be other than that he said, I want to come back to the UK?
On the note of Harry, he says that he doesn't feel safe, but then he's happy to take millions and millions of pounds right in spare that he had killed numerous people. Now, obviously, this is in a war zone, and I'm not saying he wasn't entitled to do that, but he does know how to behave in the most appalling way publicly, like a brat. And I can't think of a more eloquent way to say it because that is exactly how he behaves. We saw recently on the Stephen Colbert show, he was getting into politics in the most offensive way. And I think we can hopefully all agree that regardless of where you stand politically, if you have the name Prince in front of your name, you should not be rude about the current president of the United States. What do you make of this? Because it has deeply offended people all around the world, and rightly so.
Well, there's two separate things there. So I think saying in his book that he had personally killed 25 members of the Taliban was incredibly foolish. But weirdly, your risk assessment shouldn't really depend on whether you've been a brat or whether you've been an idiot. It should depend on your risk, right? So even if there's an argument to say this person has very foolishly increased the risk upon themselves, it shouldn't mean that it shouldn't affect ultimately the the dispassionate bureaucratic process of the risk management board. On the Colbert thing, I think it was absolutely an extraordinary appearance. This man who we're told wants to earn his own money, wants to be financially independent, appeared to have nothing to promote, right? So why was he on the show in the first place? Second, as you say, for a prince of the realm to be making jokes about the leader of another country is really out of line, especially when they're being referred to as the prince. Like literally there were 15 or 18 references to the word prince in that sketch because it was all about him being a hallmark prince and, you know, ha ha ha. But like the idea that Harry should go on to a late night television show, which is in itself quite a political act at the moment in the United States because those shows are so controversial, and make these sort of punchlines about America's, you know, because this is not like a gag for a foreigner to be making, because it is the very core of America's existential crisis at the moment. Is on one side you have Trump supporters who say that all these people have got Trump derangement syndrome and, you know, Trump's a brilliant leader. And on the other side, you've got people who fear that there's a creeping slide towards authoritarianism. It's not a suitable subject for any foreigner to be joking about, let alone one whose dad is the head of state of the United Kingdom and who is still a prince of the realm. And the point that I think is so important is that while he's still called Prince Harry, there can effectively, for most people in the world, right, for people who are watching this or people who are reading my Substack or reading you or what have you, they understand, right, that there is distinction, that Harry has left the royal family, that he's no longer a working royal. For the other 98% of people on the planet who are getting their news off Facebook, they see Prince Harry and they think he's a member of the royal family, So why is a member of the royal family going on American TV and taking the mickey out of Donald Trump? It's not a great look. And I think, frankly, it completely advances the argument of why all the titles do need to be removed, really as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. On the political aspect, time and time again, they are political, Harry and Meghan, and it's deeply uncomfortable for many to watch this, regardless of political alignment, because with everything going on around the UK, we're told, our royal family can't get involved in anything political. And now we see Harry and Meghan constantly pushing a democratic line, and pushing ahead things for the Democrats. And I would still say this if they were doing it for the Republicans. I don't believe they should be doing either. If they are on the royal website, regardless of if they are working royals or not, they should not be aligning themselves. Do you feel with this that they are using Archewell as a framework to advance certain political narratives?
Yeah, I think that what they're really doing is they're letting it be known that they are no longer, if you really want to think about what Harry's really trying to say by going on and making a bunch of jokes about Donald Trump, right? It's very clearly a breach of the agreement of the Sandringham Summit, where you're going to uphold the values of Her Majesty in everything you do, right? Political impartiality, political neutrality is obviously a core value of the British royal family. So I think there's an element of it saying the Sandringham Summit rules no longer exist and no longer apply to us. And we are moving on from that. That's in the past and this is in the future. And I think it's also, I think they were very humiliated by Meghan appearing on that Bloomberg interview and saying that she sort of had nothing to say about the current political situation, that if she did, she would, but actually she didn't have anything to say, having previously tried to position themselves so firmly in the sort of, quote unquote, progressive Democrat camp. So I think there were a couple of different things going on at the same time, but I think the main message was, we're independent now and we're going to say what we want and we don't have to abide by your rules.
It's actually petrifying because we've been here before with Sarah and Andrew and we've seen the loose cannons. And that brings me on to the area of Andrew. So Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has ignored Congress and their request to speak to him, as we all knew he would. Do you think at any point anything will happen to Andrew, or do you think that we are all meant to forget about this?
Look, I think Andrew's a loathsome toad, right? Let there be no doubt about that. But I think those senators and congressmen issuing their self-important press releases saying that Andrew needs to come over immediately. I mean, why are they wasting everybody's time? Get on and do something useful. He's never going to show up. Like, it's just absurd. Like, if that's what you really want, try and do something that has some teeth. Don't just write him a polite letter. I thought it was the most cynical and ridiculous thing. Andrew doesn't have very many friends left, but I did speak to one of his friends at the time who basically said exactly that. They said, whatever you think of Andrew, like, he's never, ever, ever going to show up at a Congress, at the American Congress. He's probably never, ever going to go to America again. Like, so the idea that suddenly all these sort of congressmen can climb aboard this bandwagon and kind of just say, Andrew needs to come here immediately. He's a disgrace. I mean, Jesus, tell me something I don't know. I just thought it was a very, very unimpressive piece of PR. I don't know about you.
I welcome any move that is going to hold people to account that have been, where the alleged victim has suffered, without a doubt. But I would also like to see Bill Clinton questioned. I would like to see everyone named. in and around Epstein. I think there has to be a much wider look into it. I think this is the biggest cover-up we've ever seen. It's utterly disgraceful. And we see people like Andrew and Sarah, they have money, or well, they claim they don't, but they do. And I have a real issue with normal people who don't have the money and the contacts and the wealth not having the same shot at justice as the likes of Andrew and Sarah. Do you think Andrew will leverage his contacts in the Middle East and still monetize who he is? Or do you think he will slip away to the new house and we won't see him again?
I mean, it's very hard to say, isn't it? I mean, they've been written off so many times before, and they've always seemed to have found a way back, or seemed to have found sponsors, seemed to have found friends. I mean, you'd have to say on any, logical analysis of where we are that it's game over. I personally think that it'll actually be the kids now who, if there is going to be any leveraging, and in fact, we've already seen this, right? Haven't we? So it seems to me that probably that is the way that Andrew is still, and Andrew's family are still going to be able to derive some, get a bit more blood out of the stone. I would suspect, if anything, it'll be through the kids. And I think it's very unwise for the king to yet again be, trying to bring them into the fold, trying to give Beatrice royal patronages. I mean, and I actually, the other day when Beatrice was doing an event for like premature babies, I thought these guys have they must think we're so unbelievably stupid that you can sort of clothe yourself in this sort of really sad, really important cause that, I thought it was, and I know she's had a premature baby herself, and I'm sure she's done great stuff as a person and great stuff as an individual. But for her to be up there as HRH, and again, it just comes back to the framing, doesn't it? It just comes back to the framing of it. Do things privately, by all means. Do things privately. Beatrice York, whatever you want to call yourself. But it's completely mad for the British monarchy, which is in so much trouble reputationally, to be putting these people forward. Like, I'm sorry, I don't want Prince Andrew's kids speaking for me.
Do you think the palace need, I mean, I'd say a rocket up their backside, but do you think they've lost control of perception in the media, or do you think this is a rocky patch that they will get through?
Well, I think actually what's really interesting is that if you look at it from their point of view, right, they're doing a brilliant job, because the newspapers come in, and the Telegraph and the Mail and the newspapers come in, and they all say the king's wonderful. He's a steely, he's ridden, he's ruling the roost with a rod of iron, and everything's absolutely marvelous. And the problem is, because the palace have such tight control over the journalism that appears in the mainstream papers and the BBC and the ITV, because literally if you step out of line, and people are threatened with this. I myself was thrown out of the International Royal Rota for writing,
and that's why we like you, Tom.
So like, they've got such tight control over them that no one can write anything critical. So it's a bit like Pravda, it's a bit like the sort of 1984 or something, where the media just keep saying everything is brilliant, but in reality, people are going out and spray painting the name Prince off their road, which is called Prince Andrew Court, right? And we've all seen those pictures of the streets with the names spray painted out. Like, that is the level of anger out there, right? And we're being told that this is all absolutely brilliant, and that he's moving out any day now. Oh, sorry, actually, maybe it's not till October, and blah, 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 blah. But because
now it's next year.
now it's next year. But because the only media that comes in to the palace is the BBC and the Telegraph, and then they deliberately are not exposed to any dissenting voices, right? They think everything's brilliant. But actually, if you go on social media, even if you just go and talk to people, British people in a pub, you'll see they're very, very dissatisfied with the monarchy. And when opinion poll surveys are done, which are one thing that the royals do actually listen to, and they do a lot of private polling, I think tell the story very clearly that the monarchy is as unpopular as it has been since the days of Princess Diana. So since the death of Princess Diana. So I mean, I think that, you know, it's